all colleagues. On behalf of the Academy of Science, the Artificial Intelligence Lekgotla, ASSAf, part of ASSAf thinking for the benefit of society. This Lekgotla is more about society, I suspect, than about artificial intelligence itself. It's about real intelligence, especially in the approach to AI. A long time ago, in the 1980s, I asked a colleague about an honors student and her capability. He said, she's good, but she tends to believe the computer. And I think that the operative word there is believe. Since then, several additional revolutions have occurred, originating in science and affecting society. The invention of machine learning and natural language processing and generative tools has allowed science to make immense strides in the hands of scientists. But I'm going to give a quick quote from Terry Pratchett. Science is not about building a body of facts, of known facts. It's a method for asking awkward questions and subjecting them to a reality check, thus avoiding the human tendency to believe whatever makes us feel good. Perhaps the last comment there about belief is the one in which AI is most widely misunderstood. Perform tasks that appear to involve logic or reasoning. And I'm quoting Google's AI there. The interaction with society, as we know, is profound. Some time ago, I read Kurt Vonnegut's book, Player Piano, published in 1952. In his fictional world, manufacturing distribution is entirely undertaken by ingenious machines driven by punch card programs. Sounds like my own PhD. A handful of engineers and managers keep the machines running. Everyone else should be living a utopian life where they're supplied with all material needs, but they aren't. They are in revolt for a variety of reasons. And underneath these lie several. They are not needed. The dignity of work, of purpose, and of meaning in society has been lost. So I, for one, look forward very much to today's debate. And my final word is my favorite meme in introducing the speakers: think while it's still legal. Now over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the series and then our speakers. My name is Martin Bekker, and I'm an AI ethicist, also based at Wits. We find ourselves in the midst of a great many changes that we're all aware of, and I enjoy stepping back just a little bit to reflect on how AI has become ubiquitous in so many ways, and in many instances quite gradually or subtly. We had our word processors introduced the idea of spell check, that later became an automatic spell checker, and that later became the predictive text on our phones. Now, quite a few even experts in AI would say that that's not real AI anymore. Our digital cameras used to have automatic white balance. And now our cell phones have light filters that automatically adjust when we're taking a picture of a sunset. Well, that's AI as well. But of course, then in 2022, at the end of the year, AI exploded in another way and through large language models, and made it a common concern, and in some ways also a common fear, and for good reason. So the scholarly publishing unit at ASSAf then took the stance to organize and facilitate a series of discussions among public thinkers, public intellectuals, about the big questions that this kicks up, whether these are about what is AI and what isn't, what are the ethics around that, what are the immediate effects, what does it mean for research. And the point of these discussions is that we seek to have people of different viewpoints, different priorities, and different insights, and bring them together in exactly the way that social media wouldn't do that. So it's not about body slams and whatever the wrestling terms are, but it's about actual meaningful public engagement. Now, in 2025, this has come to be known as the AI Lekgotla series. Lekgotla here used in the Basotho Botswana sense of gathering at the Kgotla of to discuss the important communities. And while we don't really have a Khosana, I describe myself as the Motlatle Lady Wakotla, the court jester who's allowed to speak freely, who can provoke, who can challenge authority. But of course, Baholo, we have 4 Bakudutumacha, wise leaders who are going to do exactly that today. We're interested in education, and today we're talking about education, we're talking about skills, and we've moved through at least 4 phases, or at least 4 approaches to this. The traditional one saying that, well, what the age of AI will mean is that jobs that are dirty, dull, or dangerous, the 3 Ds, will get automated away, and that would be a boon to society. We've moved to that idea of saying, well, what is it to be human? It ought to be critical thinking, and that's the thing that will endure, and that's the skill that we should nourish, and everything else might fade away. Certainly a contested, provocative view. We've had a third, more recent position saying, well, pattern recognition jobs, those are the ones that are in danger. We shouldn't be teaching pattern recognition because that is something that can be outsourced to the robots, so to speak. And then, of course, the very recent point also saying that job X will not disappear. It will be job X without AI. So lawyers will disappear. Not quite. In fact, it will only be lawyers without AI. So we have 4 speakers today from different epistemic backgrounds, and we're going to start first. Oh, before I do that, some house rules. I've been asked to just mention those. So the first is friends and colleagues. When you log in, please enter your full name and organization. The second one is please keep your camera off and your microphone muted throughout the sessions. During the Q&A, please use the chat box and comments, but you can also use the Q&A box. So we'll use a mixture of that, but of course, it will open to the floor. And then finally, if you experience any technical issues, try logging out and logging back in, all that standard thing. Worse than that, restart your device, or all the other sanity checks, like checking your speaker volume and things like that. Ensure that your Zoom screen is not minimized. And then also note that this event is live streamed at the ASSAf YouTube channel, which is very easy to find. So we're going to go cycle through our 4 speakers. So excited about that. And then we will, in the ASSAf tradition, allow the speakers to engage among themselves. And after that, turn that over as per the program, as per the agenda, to the audience. So our first speaker is Werner Cloete. Werner is a former teacher, a headmaster, a former science teacher, and head of character development, all at Paul Roos. He's now the CEO of Calling Education, which, to the best of my knowledge, runs 3 schools. This is high-quality, holistic education in poor communities. I may be the only person on this call who also has a copy of Werner's book, which gives me great delight. So I do have a bit of inside track there. Werner, welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Dr. Bekker, thank you very much for that introduction. I did not expect a display of the book. You've got a very old version. I'll have to make sure you get a more updated one in a few weeks. So let's talk about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Such an amazing privilege for me to have this opportunity to share my very humble thoughts with you and to take part in this discussion, which I really look forward to. So thank you for welcoming me. I look forward to it. Let me share as my presentation with you quickly. I hope that should be all good. Martin,
All
can I
good,
get
yes.
a
Yeah.
nod of approval? Thank you very much. So I first want to comment about the design of this image that we all saw. I love that in the forefront or in the foreground, you've got the cogs and the AI and the careers and the jobs, but it's sitting almost on a canvas, is it not, of this natural design, beauty, maybe we can even call it passion or wildness. So I like to take from this design that we cannot ignore the backdrop on which the topic that is front of mind for us today sits. Now, perhaps the designer had something else in mind. Maybe those dark clouds were meant to signal impending doom of some sort. But I prefer to go with the former interpretation that there's a balance when we talk about AI to be struck between natural beauty, passion, wildness, purpose, calling, and then the very mechanics in the foreground. So I come at this topic from the perspective of a high school science teacher, and I am often part of conversations where people talk about good schools. What are these good schools? And my contribution to a recent discussion was, what is a school? If we can first define what is a school, or what is an education, then we can take that definition and according to that definition measure whether we are good at that. And I offered the definition that a good education or a good school will position students to lay hold of their callings in life. Now, obviously, that is a multifaceted thing: academics, skills, character, sense of purpose, sense of involvement in your community, family roles one day. There's so much that encompasses this idea of calling and purpose. What do we do as educational institutions that really light that fire? I've got a friend, one of my closest friends, who's the deputy principal at a leading Cape Town school. And he recently said to me, he feels sorry for the top performers in his school because they are limited in their choices of tertiary study. And I said, well, what do you mean? Are you not, don't you have a wider choice when you perform well academically? And he said, well, that may be true, but societal expectations of top performers are typically geared in some certain fields, and fields that are lower down the pecking order do not get the attention they deserve from these top achievers. Heaven forbid they would become teachers or pastors or something, of the like. And his comment was great. He said that he thinks that some of these top performers may be ignoring their inner design when they consider their tertiary study opportunities. And I think there's a light parallel to be drawn between today's topic and his remark. With AI upending the future of work, and rightly so, and the future of tertiary study, I think we are at risk of ignoring that natural backdrop, that canvas, that inner design, and having that inner clarity in terms of what we were made to do in this world. To move a little bit towards the technology, let me read you this quote. This is considered a macro invention about a certain type of technology because it is new technology with big effects. Its importance lies in its impact, setting in train a long trajectory of advance that results in huge increases in productivity. Now, you may think this quote refers to the advent of the internet or something like that, but in fact, that quote refers to the Industrial Revolution in Britain when it refers to the so-called spinning jenny, which is that sort of domestic mechanization of hand spinning, which enabled workers to attend to 8 spools at one time, dramatically increasing productivity. And about 8% of British jobs in the 1770s were hand spinning jobs. So you can just imagine the impact on the rural communities in terms of loss of jobs at the time when workers became 8 times more productive. And there was a recent piece that you can see reference to there at the bottom that spoke of the advent of AI as a spinning jenny moment, so to speak, for office workers. And there was a call on companies for the ethical considerations in terms of engaging, with AI while keeping in mind the fairness towards employees. So this is a hot topic, and maybe to some extent it's been for hundreds of years. Another great example that I love looking into history and seeing these patterns, is that of the switchboard operator. In the 1920s, about 300,000 people worked as switchboard operators in the USA. It was the 5th most common, most important job for young women. But then mechanization of this led to a loss of 80% of those jobs. And what intrigues me is what skills and character traits did the 20% of people who didn't lose their jobs, what skills and traits did they have to ensure that they kept their job maybe within that industry, but perhaps not as a switchboard operator exactly like that. Let me read you an interesting quote about the role of the switchboard operator. They said the role demanded quick decision-making, meticulous attention to detail, a very good memory for names, and then a total left field one, the ability to handle criticism. And I thought that is now, for me, a striking a balance between skills and character that one needed to be successful in this job. And I would imagine that the 20% of people who kept their jobs had sort of an inner character strength along with, along with the skills that they had. I don't want to open a can of worms in terms of gender roles in jobs, but you can clearly see from that photo the women that worked in this industry. But prior to that, they used boys. Listen to this, and they used boys and then pivoted to ladies. It turned out there was a problem with the male switchboard operators. The boys, often barely in their teams, couldn't seem to behave themselves. Now, I worked in 3 boys' schools, so I had a good chuckle when I saw this. When any diversion held their attention, they would leave a call unanswered for any length of time and then return to the impatient subscriber's profanity. And then hoping to find operators who would be more attentive to their duties and not cuss out the customers, the local phone companies began to recruit girls and young women. I had a chuckle with this, and like I said, I don't want to enter into any controversy, but what this does signal to me is that it is okay if, when a new technology comes along, that not everyone has to immerse themselves to the same depth in that technology. There might be an inner design of some people that means that it is okay for me not to immerse myself fully in this forthcoming or this imminent rise of any technology. And, one could easily become dismissive when you look at these historical trends and you're like, oh, well, these changes, rise and falls of technology is just a historical trend. It's okay. It's going to pass. But really, I think the people who were aware at the time, spinning Jenny and this telephone switchboard, of their own inner design, their own character, their own skills, but they also had an awareness of the societal trend. I think the people that were awake to both of those realities were probably the people that could really benefit from the rise of those early technologies. I want to loop back quickly to this whole thing of purposeful education and what it means to be a good school. So you can see our school there on the left. Those learners are in Calling Academy. We run 3 of those schools, like Dr. Bekker said. And I want to quickly talk about our program called Call to Impact. What we do in this program is we teach the principles of poverty alleviation to learners living in low-income areas, enable them with sort of the right view of how to do poverty alleviation. They then have to go home. They have got to design a concept in how they want to alleviate poverty in their context. They have to write an essay about it to structure their thoughts. They have to have a quick chat with the teacher in charge to soundboard, and then they have to present their ideas to a panel. The panel then critiques their ideas, trying to shoot holes in their plans, almost like a Dragon's Den sort of setup. And that process is really known as the Oxford tutorial method. Research, writing up an essay, and developing your own opinions, and then coming to defend your opinions in front of a panel. And the depth of engagement and belief that one could develop in your project through that process, we think, is really significant. Now, these 2 guys came to the panel and they said, panel, we have this idea. We want to help a barber shop in Kayamandi, the township of Kayamandi, and we want to do that by buying something to cover the door with when it rains. I said to them, whatever do you mean cover the door with when it rains? That makes no sense. I said, no, sir, what you don't know is that in the township, the door of the barber shop is made of zinc. So when it rains, the barber shop owner closes the door to keep the rain out, simultaneously making it impossible for passers-by to see that there's an active barbershop inside. So his most important mode of advertising has been cut off by the fact that he had to close the door. And if we could buy a plastic curtain to hang down just over the door when it is open, He can keep his door open, keep the rain out, and people can still see inside the barbershop is active. And I thought to myself, I would never have thought of that because I don't have the contextual knowledge. I don't have that local ingenuity. And if we could find a way to unlock that ingenuity, that creativity, and bestow on these learners who engage in these community projects really a sense of purpose, dignity, and agency. And that agency, I think, is such an important thing with the topic at hand. What is the agency that we bestow to people through the education that we give them in an age of AI? I love that little maxim, values are caught, not taught. Within relationship, within human connection, there's a transferal of values, of calling, of purpose, of a sense of meaning in my life that I cannot just put up on a screen for someone to catch. So, do we lean more into our humanness, or do we lean more into developing our artificial intelligence skills? And I think the answer is an unequivocal yes, we do. We do both. I think this will lead to a stretching of us as humans to really lean deeper into our humanness and discover those themes of calling and purpose and meaning and agency and dignity afresh, while we also say, listen, there is imminent technologies rising up that we need to properly engage with to be well positioned in this changing world. And the risk, of course, is that we would lean too far to the one and ignore the other. And my concern, I think, is that with the excitement and the novelty and even the addiction sometimes that come with screens and with AI technologies, that we would gravitate towards developing in that direction, ignoring the true human nature of what we need to discover. And I think that's why I entitled this talk, Sensing Purpose in an AI-Driven World, that we really need to dig deep into those questions. And I will say why I think that is the case. Because what type of person do we regard as future ready? Now, there's 100 things one could say about this, and you can Google and you'll find so many different things. But I think a person who's future ready really has that sense of calling. A person who's motivated, purposeful, both inspired and inspiring. Someone who has a sense that my life has a work to accomplish. I'm not just a robot. There's something that is a design about me that can bring something to the world, the problems of the world, the opportunities of the world. Where is that overlap? Someone who has the inner clarity and the external awareness and can hold both of those two in tension with another and make make situational judgments based on those two things. Someone who's keen to learn and develop, someone who's unafraid, someone who has that growth mindset, who will embrace the advent of new technologies without forfeiting that knowledge of their inner design. Someone who's got personal confidence because they've got this awareness of purpose, leading them to have great personal and interpersonal competence. What about the skills? Independent thinking was mentioned earlier. That's why I think something like this Oxford tutorial method that really promotes the forming, the careful forming, the research-based forming, and then the respectful defending of your opinions, I think is a critical skill for the future. But then still you have to be able to enhance your own productivity through AI. I listened to a TED talk recently where the person said, if we speak of artificial intelligence, that comes with a big threat. And it is a threatening term. He prefers augmented intelligence that says, listen, we've got our real intelligence or whatever you want to call it, our humanness, and let's augment that with the AI tools. Even Microsoft Excel, has got brilliant AI tools, pivot tables, whatever it may be, AI-assisted writing, content generation, and then obviously the ethical considerations that go with all of that. I think we have to be well-versed in all of this to add to our independent thinking and the human factors that I mentioned earlier. So university and college courses, I mean, if we want to make decisions, we have to be aware of the megatrends. The advent of AI has created a megatrend, and remote work possibilities is a megatrend. I know companies in Netherlands that employ South African engineers and South African accountants that sit in Cape Town, and they work for Dutch companies or American companies. And one shouldn't limit oneself when we think about the future of work, and forget that the remote work possibilities is part of this entire discussion. And there are so many job opportunities out there globally. Study something that will allow you to express your life purpose. If we're saying study this or study that, do not ignore that inner design and that that resonance that you experience when you look at the world's problems and the world's opportunities, you are drawn to solve some of those problems. Do not ignore that. Study something that will allow you to express your life purpose. When we appoint people, we look for competence, character, and chemistry. So you need the skills, but you also need the inner work that has been done over years where you've invested in your character, but also interpersonal confidence to work in a team as a human. I want to end off.
Mr. Cloete,
Yes.
sorry, can we please ask you to close that little pop-up screen on your side which says App Zoom US is sharing? Can you please hide it?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. I'm at my last slide anyway, and I think my time is just about up. So I asked ChatGPT, how do I find purpose in an AI-driven world? And I got this: finding purpose in a world shaped by AI can feel overwhelming, but it's important to remember that AI is a tool created by humans. It is a reflection of our creativity. And I thought, who's speaking now? Our creativity, innovation, and desire to solve the complex problems. The key to finding purpose in such a world is aligning your unique qualities, passion, and skills with the opportunities and challenges AI presents. Thank you so much for allowing me to share with you. Thank you.
Wonderful, Werner. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're still sharing your screen, so there we go. Oh, fantastic. Yes, that was quite thought-provoking and quite a journey. I mean, you would trust the science teacher to say that we look for people with chemistry, right?
Spot on.
So, well noted. And we look forward to the engagement a bit later. Our next speaker is Professor Cobus Oosthuizen. Cobus is Dean of Postgraduate Studies at Boston City campus. He's an extraordinary associate professor at the Northwest University Business School. He's on several board positions, many august publications behind his name, and he's going to share with us from the perspective now of practical wisdom. Over to you. Thanks, Prof.
Martin, thank you so much. Let me just quickly get to the share screening and select the correct one.
Looking good, Prof.
Looking good. Fantastic. Martin, thank you so much. And colleagues, good afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be part of this esteemed panel. Really privileged to be part of the conversation on AI and the future of work at this Lekgotla. And my point of inference is perhaps a little bit more philosophical. And I've titled my reflections this afternoon that of beyond skills, cultivating practical wisdom for the age of AI. So maybe if you'll allow me just to set the scene, I thought we'd share a graph posted on LinkedIn by renowned scholar Ethan Mollick, which you probably, many of you know based on his writings, which highlights AI's capability. Now, that was about 2 weeks or so ago. So this is just a snapshot, obviously, with a lot of other detail, but you can see from the capability perspective, on the y-axis, there's a metric called the GPQA Diamond Score metric, serving to assess proficiency of both AI systems and human experts in addressing highly challenging scientific problems. Now you can see right at the top where it's already indicating that it's probably very much to that of a human PhD in their particular field. The x-axis shows us the cost over time in a very short space of time. We talk about here from about 2023 up to recently, 2 weeks ago, as I said. And you can see the cost of per million tokens, how dramatically that is also reducing. So there's phenomenal progress in this space. So and against that backdrop, then let me move into the reflections, or my reflections of today. So, and it has been said, and let me repeat, needless to say, we are living through a profound shift. One where AI is not just automating routine tasks, but reshaping entire industries and redefining the nature of work itself. But we often hear concerns about AI replacing jobs. And while some roles will indeed become obsolete, and it has come through in Werner's talk as well, history shows that technological disruptions don't just eliminate work, but rather transform it. So I think the real challenge is not whether jobs will disappear, but whether we, as professionals, educators, and leaders, are equipping ourselves and our workforce with the right skills to thrive in this new era. And some industries like healthcare, finance, and creative industries, I think will thrive, or could thrive, as AI enhances decision-making and productivity. Others, again, reliant on repetitive tasks with little need for human judgment, may struggle. The question we must ask is, how do we position ourselves to be in the industries that thrive? And how do we cultivate the skills that AI cannot replicate? Now, that's where I argue we should turn to the concept of Aristotle's phronesis, or in English, practical wisdom, as a guide for navigating the future of work. In this rush to prepare for the AI-driven economy, there's understandably focus on technical skills, coding, data science, cybersecurity. But I think the most enduring skill in the AI era is not technical at all. I believe it's practical wisdom. That ability to make sound, ethical, and contextually relevant decisions in complex situations. Let's consider a real-world example. AI can analyze vast amounts of medical data and suggest diagnosis, but it cannot replace the ethical responsibility of a doctor who must weigh a patient's circumstances, values, and quality of life before making a final decision. Similarly, AI can generate business strategies, yes, but it cannot exercise judgment about long-term ethical consequences or human impacts. That remains the domain of wise leaders. So in this landscape, knowing what to do is no longer enough. I think we must develop the wisdom to apply knowledge in nuanced, unpredictable situations. And this, in my view, is the skill that will separate the irreplaceable professionals from those who risk being automated out of relevance. But colleagues, if we cannot predict the future with certainty, how do we prepare for it? And I think the answer lies in cultivating a mindset, and Werner also made reference to mindset, a mindset that thrives in uncertainty, one built on resilience, adaptability, and continuous learning. So I think rather than asking, what job should I train for? I think the better question is, how do I train myself to adapt to any job that might emerge, or the jobs that emerges? And this is where we move from fixed expertise to meta competencies. And I fell in love with this word when I discovered another scholar using it to counter the one often used of soft skills. Meta skills or meta competencies is a much better descriptor. So move from fixed expertise to meta competencies, learning how to learn, solving complex problems, and as Martin also at the beginning referred to, thinking critically, although the term might have been diluted quite a bit over time. So I think resilience means understanding that career reinvention is not a failure. It's actually a necessity. And adaptability means embracing change as an opportunity rather than a threat. And of course, strategic learning means focusing not just on acquiring information, but on applying knowledge in meaningful ways. So if we cultivate these qualities, I think we do more than survive the AI revolution. In fact, I think we can help shape it. So we become not just workers, but architects of the future of work. Remember, colleagues, AI did not drop onto the planet like a meteorite. We created it. Perhaps you and I in this room, not directly, but indirectly as adopters and end users. So in a way, AI is a mirror of society, as renowned scholar Shannon Valler describes in her book, The AI Mirror. And she argues the case for what AI could be, a way to reclaim our human potential for moral and intellectual growth, rather than lose ourselves in mirrors of the past. So now let's bring the discussion home. I think Africa stands at a critical juncture in the AI revolution. On the one hand, we face significant challenges such as unequal access to technology, gaps in digital skills, and an education system that has not yet fully adapted to AI-driven change. And on the other hand, we have an incredible opportunity to move beyond outdated models and position ourselves as leaders in ethical, human-centered adoption, human-centered AI adoption. So I think the question is then, will Africa shape AI, or will AI shape Africa? And the answer, I think, lies in how we prepare our workforce. And AI literacy must become as fundamental as literacy itself. I remember some years ago saying to my wife, if you are computer illiterate, you are illiterate. So tongue in cheek, now I think we're moving into a future where being AI illiterate, one might also be illiterate. And by that, colleagues, I don't mean the coding and the programming and things like that, but the phenomenon being part of, so integrated in our existence, that we have to understand it in the way in which we engage with it. So therefore, our education institutions must shift from traditional rote learning to really fostering the critical thinking, the problem solving, digital adaptability, and those meta competencies that I referred to. In our own case, just as an example, we've introduced modules such as management philosophy and managing disruptive technologies in our recently launched MBA program. We've also introduced an AI tutor built on a Socratic inquiry approach. So it's not an AI tutor that just tells you stuff. It actually engages based on one's own point at one's own progress in that learning journey. So just as an example. So if we embrace AI not as a threat, but as a tool, we combine technological advancement with the wisdom of phronesis, then Africa can position itself as a hub of AI-driven innovation rather than a causality of automation. But furthermore, as AI integrates into our workforces, we must ask, are we using AI responsibly? Are we ensuring that technology serves human dignity rather than undermining it? And we've heard about cases where AI has led to biased hiring decisions, unethical surveillance, and even decisions that put profit over human well-being. So yes, if AI is left unchecked, it risks eroding trust and fairness in our workplaces. So what is our responsibility? Well, I think firstly, we must demand transparency in AI decision-making. If an AI system rejects a job candidate or approves a loan, we should understand why. We should understand what's happening in that so-called black box that we can't see. Second, we must maintain human oversight in AI-driven processes. AI should assist decision-making, not replace it entirely. And I think, thirdly, we must create a culture where ethical considerations are embedded in how we design, deploy, and govern AI in the workplace. So the future of work is not just about efficiency. I believe it's about ensuring that technology enhances human dignity rather than diminishes it. So colleagues, we've talked about how AI is changing work, importance of practical wisdom, ethical considerations. Now, just to get a little bit more practical, what should individuals then do to remain relevant in this evolving job market? And I think the answer is not study this one degree or learn this one skill. I suggest it's about cultivating an AI resilient career strategy. That could be many things, but maybe just a few. Mastering interdisciplinary thinking. So combining technical knowledge with creativity, ethics, and business acumen, as well as developing strong human skills. AI can, as we've said, process data, but it cannot lead teams. It cannot inspire innovation, and it cannot build relationships. Werner referred to relationships as well. And then, of course, and again, something that might have become quite diluted, but that we really need to embrace, lifelong learning. I think that no degree will future-proof one's career, but the habit of learning will. So ultimately, the professionals who will thrive are not those who resist AI, nor those who blindly embrace it. It's those who know how to work with AI, applying practical wisdom, and continuously adapt to new realities. Colleagues, as I close, let's briefly revisit what I intend to make the message. AI is not something to fear. It's something to understand, to guide, and to integrate wisely into our professional and personal lives. The key to thriving in the AI era is not just technical skills, but practical wisdom. That ability, as I said, to make thoughtful, ethical, forward-looking, contextual, relevant decisions in a world of uncertainty. So what is our call to action? As individuals, we must develop the skills that AI cannot replace. As educators, we must prepare students not just for today's jobs, but for tomorrow's unpredictable careers. And as leaders, we must ensure that AI serves humanity rather than replacing it. I think that the future of work is not about machine versus humans. It is about how we, as humans, use wisdom to shape the machines and the world that they create. And with that, colleagues, I thank you and really looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you very much, Prof Oosthuizen. That was fantastic. Yeah, as an analytical philosopher, we like to joke that as a continental philosopher, we like to joke about analytical philosophers and say that they see the world either as splitters or lumpers. And those who assign themselves the duty to be able to assign splitters or lumpers, well, they're just meta splitters. So your idea of meta competencies brought much joy. Thank you, Prof. Colleagues, friends, up next we have Professor Boitumelo Diale. Prof Tumi is from Plaatje University, where she is Dean of Education and full professor there. She's an educational psychologist. She has a background also from the UJ, very well published with a slew of books. Unfortunately, I couldn't repeat my party trick and pull off another book or a few of them, but certainly they are out there. Prof Tumi is going to speak about AI in the curriculum. Prof Tumi, the floor is yours, but you are sharing the notes screen, not the presentation screen. If it's possible for you to just swap them around, please. Oh, you're still muted, Prof. Yes, Prof, you're still muted.
I've just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see my slides?
We can see it. It's in the editing mode now.
Should I ask AI to help me better?
Bottom right, you can go to the presentation mode. If
yes, that's what I was trying to go to.
Let's see if it plays ball. Not yet. Yes.
It is now.
Perfect. It's rendering, yes. Thank you, Prof.
Okay. Thank you. And good afternoon to everyone. And thank you really to ASSAf for inviting me to share today with you. Looking at the whole range of the Lekgotla or the Makgotlas in terms of discussions, today I'm going to engage or have a conversation with you in terms of artificial intelligence, the curriculum and the world of work. And maybe a combination of the curriculum and the world of work comes from the background of being an educationist and a psychologist at the same time in the field of career development. And I actually, as I was preparing for this, I actually thought, looking at the title, maybe I need to think about how do we navigate the intersection between education, technology, and career development for many of us. I want to start first. Please, can you confirm with me if my slides are moving?
Gloriously.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to start by, in my introduction, talking about understanding the different generations where we are in higher education. Probably, I would say, predominantly majority of us, we are in that generation X or baby boomers kind of generation. We do give, or we do have rich experiences, traditional values, structured approaches to learning and development. And we have those millennials that are beginning to enter higher education as academics, that are young staff, that are alumni, that are tech savvy, that are collaborative, that are looking at work-life balance. But we are sitting in our classroom with the Generation Z, our students that are digital natives, that value authenticity, and that really are very strong in terms of social justice and agency and equality. So as we navigate the issue of artificial intelligence within the curriculum space, it is important for us to keep those three issues in mind, that we are talking about intergenerational people being within the same space. And I had to ask myself, colleagues, when we talk of artificial intelligence, are we really wanting to focus on artificial intelligence or on augmented intelligence? As from where I stand as an educationist, when we talk of the word curriculum, from when I was trained as a teacher, when I joined academia, and what mostly happens now, curriculum is something that is in order. It's orderly. We teach A, B, C, D, and it follows in that way. Therefore, curriculum development is basically a set of rules that stipulate what is to be taught, by whom should it be taught, how should it be taught, and when should it be taught. But the reality that we are finding ourselves today as we sit in this colloquium is that the current status quo is that artificial intelligence is troubling and revolutionizing our curriculum development in educational systems across the globe, we realize that the future is in the present. Whatever we thought would happen is happening now, and we need to act now. And it is important for us to understand that our students face a future where both the content of work and the very nature of professional identity are being redefined. As educators, therefore, we must prepare ourselves and prepare them, not just with technical skills, but with psychological resources to navigate the continuous change. We all know that the most constant thing in life is change in its own self. So the question is not whether artificial intelligence will transform education and work. But the bigger question, as my colleagues have said, it's how can we shape that transformation to serve the human, to flourish, and to address our unique South African contexts and challenges. Central to my argument today is the distinction, as I said, between artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence. While the former suggests replacements of human capabilities, as people normally think or perceive that machines will replace us, the latter really talks about us envisioning technology as an extension to enhance human potential. This distinction is not merely semantic. It is rather fundamental to shape how we approach curriculum design and career preparation. So we rather have to begin to think when we work with our students on how we engage in our learning outcomes and how to use artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence for that matter as a collaborator rather than a competitor. And for us to be able to do that, we really have to focus, and we need to begin to look at being student-centric. Many of the universities in South Africa, one of their key values that they say is being student-centric. And what do we say? What do we mean when we say we want to be student-centric if our curriculum is not student-centric, if our curriculum don't take into consideration the Generation Z that we are working with? So our core beliefs should be that every student has the potential to succeed and to learn in a collaborative way. So it is our responsibility to ensure that we personalize the learning paths and we include the learning pathways in order for us to have an inclusive academic system. But in us doing that, we need to understand that our cultural responsiveness is key to whatever we do. Our contextual relevance is important, and we need to actually enhance our technology learning. So it starts with what Cobus just said, that we probably have to be lifelong learners ourselves as the landscape is changing. If we think of artificial intelligence in higher education and the current landscape, there are three particular issues that I want to touch on. The first one is the content transformation. We are seeing a shift from a static, occasionally updated textbook form of learning to a dynamic content that responds to emerging knowledge. For example, we have innovations currently such as learners learning in a situation where we used mixed reality simulations, our smart classrooms, as implemented as ways of using artificial intelligence as augmenting learning and development. We also have to look at our assessment. Our assessment in terms of the curriculum is really evolving. So the assessment evolution is key. Traditional exams are increasingly being supplemented by by continuous assessment models that evaluate the process and the outcome. While we were all forced in 2020 when we had COVID to move into these continuous forms of assessment when we had the lockdown, it is interesting that I note with I actually note with interest that many academics immediately went back into the classrooms, were very quick to want to move back into the traditional way of assessment, claiming that students would be copying, students are using artificial intelligence. So I find it that we have wasted more time trying to fight what our Generation Z is doing instead of us trying to actually be ethical, as Cobus has said, and being transparent in what we do. So it is important for us that we actually engage into our pedagogical knowledge systems and our pedagogical innovation. Our new teaching approaches will have to include artificial intelligence facilitated collaboration, our learning and problems-based scenarios, where students work alongside artificial intelligence tools to solve complex life challenges. If we use this augmented intelligence, we are able to frame artificial intelligence as a thought partner in the classroom rather than a content delivery system replacement. Therefore, it leads to our learners learning designs where technology amplifies rather than automates human thinking. These shifts are fundamentally in altering what we constitute as essential knowledge and skills in our curricula. There are benefits in artificial intelligence curricula. And what are those benefits? The first part is the personalization and the relevance. Personalization is not just about the pace, but it is about connecting learning to cultural context and lived experiences. When curricula is adapted to individual backgrounds, we see deeper engagements and retention in our classrooms. The access question remains still a fundamental issue in our South African context. AI tools that can provide quality education regardless of geographical location or prior educational opportunities are important in transforming our educational system and in ensuring that we have the potential for addressing historical inequalities. We can never talk about AI and curriculum changes if we don't look at the worst case scenarios where we have learners who have never ever seen a laptop or a computer in their lives, who have no access to these things. If these tools are still for the minority groups, then we are still not addressing the key issues and we are still far from actually obtaining our sustainable goals. Therefore, we need to be able to expand access, to reduce geographical barriers, whilst we are increasing quality education. We need to be able to support those diverse learning needs through adaptive technologies. Interestingly, at Sol Plaatje, a recent survey was done in terms of how students choose to learn. And most of our students chose actually kinesthetic and visual learning as working together for them and helping. So we need to actually begin to ask, is the auditory kind of learning where we stand in front of the class and just talk and students have to take what we're saying still relevant for our students? Is it working for our students? How do we begin to create multilingual approaches to learning resources relevant to the South African context? Having said that, in terms of us looking at the benefits of artificial intelligences, I am not aware of the fact that, or I am not ignorant of the fact that there are challenges and there are critical concerns. The first thing that is generally brought up in terms of critical concerns is around critical thinking. We currently face a paradox where artificial intelligence tools can either enhance or undermine critical thinking. So it is upon our curriculum design that we must be intentional in creating spaces where students must exercise independent judgment and establish when to use AI and when to rely on human analysis. Because AI can never replace, as my colleagues have said, our own analysis and as human beings. And it can never take our own independence to judgment or to use our independent judgments to things. We also are aware of digital divides, as I say, which exacerbates the existing educational inequalities in our country. And therefore, this threatens us in creating a new hierarchy of educational advantages. Our national policy must begin to address infrastructure needs alongside curriculum reform. We realize, we have seen recently with our matric passes, that we find ourselves having a high pass of students who get into higher education who've got bachelors. But our universities have stayed the same number for the longest of time, except the two universities, which is ours and Mpumalanga. But also, we've been 10 years. So, and we're not growing, yet student numbers are growing. So how are we going to use then technology and artificial intelligence to ensure that we can reach far and beyond in the South African context?
Prof Diale?
Yes.
Would it be okay to wrap up in maybe 2 minutes?
Yes, I am wrapping up. Thank you,
Prof.
So in terms of the career psychological perspective, we are aware that we need to begin from a psychological perspective, have fundamental shifts and psychological shifts. So it is important for us to navigate these shifts in terms of professional identities of people and begin to develop our own identity based or in the midst of that of artificial intelligence. Therefore, career adaptability will be important. In conclusion, our curriculum imperatives is that complementarity between AI and humanity, our ethical engagement, our augmented intelligence curriculum. I want to conclude by saying there's various things I've said there, but I want to say our task is not to predict specific technologies, but to develop humans who can adopt and who can shape technological change towards social beneficial ends. With that being said, let us learn to balance technological integration with human-centered education. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. It's amazing how Prof Marwala has a way of finding his way in, even if he's not a speaker. That was amazing. Thank you very much.
I'm originally from UJ, Chair, so you will know why Prof Marwala is there.
Well, of course, you already stole my heart when you called millenniums young. So that's a win all round. Friends, colleagues, our final speaker is Professor Jonathan Jansen, who is, of course, also a former teacher, among other things. Let me mention just a few other things. He's Distinguished Professor of Education at Stellenbosch. He's the past VC and Rector at the University of the Free State. He's a past president of the Academy, a great public intellectual and inspiration. And I was recently reading the Afrikaans author Langenhoven, and two bits that I really enjoyed was his preface to the book that he wrote, that he said, the income of this book, all royalties, etc., must be paid to the University of Stellenbosch, whether they want it or not. But somewhere else in the book, he then said that die grote hoef om nie groot te hou nie. And that made me think of you, Prof, because of that inverse relationship between the greatness of a person and their self-regard. We welcome you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the other speakers. I enjoyed listening to all three of them. About 3 or 4 times a day, I walk from my office, which is where I'm sitting now in the boardroom of the office, to the other side of the education building here at Stellenbosch University. And on that pathway, I have to pass 1 or 2 big lecture halls and then also some smaller classrooms. And since I've been here, which is for about 7 or 8 years, I have yet to hear anything else but the booming voice of a professor with some notes on a board and a very quiet classroom, and every single day, that's what I hear. It's as if COVID didn't happen. it's as if the process of pivoting towards technology, and particularly the advances in technology that we have seen in recent years, it's as if those things never happen. And what is very interesting, of course, is that these same universities would have a center or a school of data science or something like that, computational thinking, etc. So there is sort of a consciousness locked up in a particular center, or perhaps a module of a professor in the engineering department or the IT department that says something about machine learning. But by and large, across a big university with 10 faculties in this case, there's very little happening with respect to AI. And I find that on the one hand, puzzling, on the other hand, not surprising at all. And the reason I am puzzled is because of the incredible pace at which technology is transforming, AI in particular, transforming universities around the world. And yet, not surprised, because institutions, whether it's a church, a mosque, or a university, institutions we know do not change easily or at all. And so this is something that I obviously think a lot about in the context of my own field, which is curriculum theory, and thinking of why not just AI, but particularly, as Martin said in his introduction, particularly since the introduction of generative language models such as ChatGPT, this is obviously something that occupies my mind. The other thing that's interesting is when higher education institutions do respond, it is often defensive. And with due respect to my colleagues, some of my colleagues who presented, I heard some of that defensiveness today, and I want to challenge that. And one of the big areas of defensiveness is, of course, with respect to integrity in student assessment. And so every single day, wherever I go, I hear academics talking about how can we prevent students from cheating using chat. I find that such a ridiculous question because, and so I think about it, why would people, in the face of what I think a very powerful and useful technology, why would your first response be a concern about cheating? And then if you do, as Werner wisely did, take the long view, that is, you look at history, then you would find out that the typewriter was an enormous threat to people in education, because how are we going to teach children to do cursive writing? Nobody does cursive writing anymore, except in very specific instances in the graphic and creative arts. But at the time, the typewriter was a real threat to writing. Think of the introduction of the calculator. You know what the major concern was historically about the calculator? It would reduce the ability of children to do mental math. In other words, to be able to solve problems in mathematics using their cognitive abilities. Today, you won't find a single teacher who doesn't say, if only I had more money for Casio calculators. And then came the cell phone, which is much more recent. And you go anywhere in the world, and people would talk about the cell phone as a distraction. I find that quite bizarre. And so the lag time between a technological invention and widespread adoption has historically always been, significant. But I tell you now, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, teachers are going to be begging kids to bring the cell phone to the classroom, as I do in the high school I teach at some mornings, because I find it incredibly useful as a resource on which to draw. So let's get into the weeds a little bit. I want to propose to you that the real reason why teachers at school or university fear ChatGPT is because, on the one hand, of poor teaching, they don't know how to teach, and secondly, because of superficial assessment designs. Poor teaching and superficial assessment designs. So I'm going to use two examples from my own practice to illustrate the point. So last year I taught in the first term a course here at Stellenbosch in, it's called the PGCE, a Postgraduate Certificate in Education. And these are typically kids who have, well, not kids, I mean, they're grown-ups, who have a first degree in another discipline, like in science or commerce or the arts. And then they want to do an additional year in order to become qualified teachers. So this course is on race, leadership, policy, and so on. And so I asked them this question: what are the qualities of leadership required for a principal in a working class school on the Cape Flats, which is where I work at the moment, right? There is no way ChatGPT can answer that question, because the question has been thought through in such a way that not only does it require you to be very context specific and require you to think about leadership in a very different way from the norm that is often set in literature, which is, of course, either middle class schools, or American schools, or European schools, but not, of course, schools in this part of the world. And so I quite happily thought through that question, not only because I think it is a question that requires them to think deeply and originally, but also because it cancels out these silly kinds of questions you get, like name the 3 parts or 4 parts of a leaf, and you can and that kind of nonsense. Okay, and then in the grade 11 life sciences class, I teach or taught this term a unit called microorganisms and disease. And if I say to the kids, name the 4 kinds of microorganisms, the classes of microorganisms that they're supposed to know, then of course you're going to quickly grab your phone and look it up. But if I ask them in the context of a discussion on disease to go more deeply, as I did, and say, why do you think there's a vaccine for coronavirus, but not a vaccine yet for HIV, which has been with us for decades? And that answer you're not going to get readily, okay, on any language model, because it requires you to think beyond simple facts and to think deeply about things like, you know, the global politics and power and the inequality in the world system and all of that stuff, and the perception of people of HIV or AIDS at the time as a gay disease, and therefore, you know, without cares, as opposed to something that affected people in the rich parts of the world in real time. That is a different kind of question to the simple. So when I talk about superficial assessments, which are often lazy assessments, it is with these kinds of examples in mind. So there are obviously many sensible ways in which to use ChatGPT, for example, in a classroom. So I want to go back to my assessment example with respect to principals. So in my class of 280 students, the PGCE class, I said to them, use AI, use ChatGPT, sorry, to generate the qualities of the principal that are required in dysfunctional schools. Take out your phone or take out your computer and generate those qualities based on what you're able to find through this particular language model. And then I say, now assess what you just found against the model that I taught you, which involves, of course, working class schools on the Cape Flats. And they really struggle with that because it is intellectually demanding. You're not just taking down notes from your device. You now have to compare what's on that device with a model that is given to you that doesn't exist anywhere in the world at the moment in this particular case. We don't really have theories of working class education since the 1970s, certainly not outside of the European context. And then they struggled, because now they have to think as opposed to simply write down. I'm just using one example of that. So I do want to warn you, colleagues, that for all its current limitations, and I heard some of you talking about limitations of AI, I want to challenge you and say this. AI is growing at a very rapid pace. The word evolve is the wrong word because it implies long periods of time. It is expanding, growing at an explosive rate, and it will address many of those limitations, such as that you mentioned for the moment, such as the capacity for justice and the capacity for empathy. Now, one of the most fascinating pieces of writing that I encountered a few weeks ago is by Hannah Rosen, writing in The Atlantic. You have to read this piece. And it's called, the title, What Does a Robot with a Soul Look Like? And so in the movie, The Wild Robot, which, by the way, won an Oscar, I think, for, among other things, sound, an operating system mimics falling in love, and so on and so forth. It is similar, I suppose, to that earlier movie called Her, H-E-R, small letters. And in this movie, there is a brief dialogue between characters, again, from this animated film. There is Roz, the helper robot, and Roz asks this question: how do you know if you love something, someone? To which Fink, one of the forest animals, replies, if you do, you should probably tell them. To which Roz responds, but what if it is too late?
Wow. Well, there's the masterclass on how to do this, colleagues. What we're going to do now is allow the speakers to engage among themselves. So we're going to cycle back to Werner Cloete. Werner, you're welcome to pose a question either to the group or to one participant specifically. What I'm going to ask we do is ask the questions one salvo. So we'll do 4 questions, 1 each, and then we respond to those. And once the dust is settled, we might go for round 2. So Werner, if you would lead us off, please.
Thank you, Martin. Fascinating contributions from everybody. Prof Oosthuizen, when you were speaking, I really liked your reference to wisdom, and you were speaking about, you can correct me, maybe you can just help me with the definition you gave, but I think you said something like wisdom is applied knowledge in nuanced situations, you know, that involves in judging character or whatever that may be. So, but my question to you, and perhaps that this could be latched onto by the others as well, we'll see how it unfolds now, but how do you develop wisdom? Because I mean, that cannot just be a function of age, because you get old people who are very unwise and you get young people who are very wise. But are there mechanisms? And I enjoyed, you know, what Prof Jansen shared now, you know, about intellectual rigor and, you know, thinking techniques and all of that stuff. Are these tools for wisdom? Can AI help us develop wisdom? In what sort of situations do we place ourselves to develop that wisdom? If you could give your thoughts on that, I thought that was a very apt distinction between wisdom and knowledge.
Werner, sorry, my colleague is answering as well, as you can hear. It's very, very keen to contribute here. Apologies for that. That's a very important question. I mean, a question that we, as you know, where I'm at, also frequently reflect on. But you know, in my own, you know, if in my view, to cultivate it, we must engage both in thoughtful reflection and virtuous action. So it's not that it is mere theoretical knowledge, nor mere technical skill. It's that capacity to deliberate well about what is good in human life and to act accordingly. So let me use an example. Seek experience in life's affairs. You know, what I mean by that is one must witness and engage with the complexities of human life to judge wisely. And so this requires active participation in personal, social, and political matters. One encounters dilemmas and learns from them, because in the Aristotelian writings, experience plays a fundamental role, but it's embedded in praxis, in the doing part. So also, like, you know, associate with the virtuous. The virtuous company that I find myself in today. Just as a craftsman improves by working alongside masters, one develops this wisdom by observing and conversing with those who are wise and just. Furthermore, maybe engaging in ethical deliberation. So regularly reflect on moral choices. I think, to use Prof Jansen's example of the assessment there, you know, considering not only immediate consequences, but also the long-term good. So, you know, asking for what is the noble action and what leads to true flourishing. So train the mind to weigh different perspectives, avoiding rashness and excessive caution. Sorry, Werner, I'm going into I'm overly excited about this, but so it is in the reflection, it's in the doing, it's immersing oneself in those contexts where your own assumptions are challenged, and you know, in those reflective moments. But maybe we can under the oaks, you know, explore these things further.
No, that's really brilliant. I think it shows that you cannot divorce you know, many of these things from just practically living well. I mean, you've got to live well, and you have to surround yourself with people that rub off on you, and you know, that you can observe and critically engage with, and you cannot divorce your development from observing well and engaging well. I think that's great. Prof Diale, I also wondered about your comment, and that I think you know, sits quite well here. I think when you said that AI can enhance or undermine critical thinking, and which one do you think it does more? And I think, you know, it does the use of AI typically lead to students thinking less critically, or perhaps more critically even, and we are maybe, like you said, you know, looking at digital natives, and we are maybe from a previous generation, and I like how you brought that in. But in what instances would you say that AI is enhancing critical thinking? Because that might be the outlier, and what has been done to unlock that? What is like the secret sauce, if you will?
Thank you, Werner. I think I want to start. It goes back to actually what I think it was Prof Jansen who said that, to say maybe it starts with the teachers, and I'm speaking from a teaching perspective as a teacher. You know, Prof Jansen said something powerful about teachers not knowing how to teach or how to assess. And if I don't know how to teach, I'm unable to impart skills of critical thinking to my learners. So that then becomes a challenge, in that then when AI is used, it is used more as a replacement more than a supplement or an enhancement of what is already being done. And that is, in that sense, that's why I spoke about augmented intelligence, to say we have our intelligence as human beings. And the more we in the education field, starting with us, probably I cannot start blaming teachers at a school level because they are trained by us. Us as in higher education, how do we begin to engage with our initial teacher educators, with our PGCE, as Prof Jansen referred to begin to critically think as human beings in their individual personalized space, but recognizing that there is other forms of intelligence, other forms of knowing or different knowledges, if I were to put that. And AI is but one of those knowledges. And how do I engage with that in a way that it still gives me my critical stance of being able to take my stance as a human being that is critically engaged with an issue from a social, political, cultural, or even contextual perspective.
Prof Jansen, would you, sorry Werner, Prof Jansen, would you say that AI can develop wisdom in learners?
Not yet. It would be my first response. And I would also venture that I probably at this point, you just look at the state of the world from Transamerica to South Africa, I probably have more faith in AI being able to develop over time these kinds of deep qualities in learners than I see amongst teachers and professors. Just to give you an example from the school sector. I always knew this, but now I see it firsthand every day, in which how our schools have been transformed into factories, in which the entire goal is to increase your matric pass rate, as we used to call it, now called the MSc. The goal is not to think. The goal is to complete the ATPs, those annual teaching plans, on time, and to do it with as little consolidation as possible because there isn't time. And then, I mean, I got schools right now I'm just going to talk about the Western Cape where I now live, which have dropped these subjects. Think of one subject, okay, that can really, and I think my colleague Werner would probably relate to this as a science teacher. Do you know there are schools now dropping physical science? They're dropping the life sciences. They're dropping what we call pure math, okay? Just so that they can get more children over the line and boast of an improved pass rate. Physics for me is apart from the life sciences, is the prince of disciplines. This is where you really get to engage in the abstract with complex ideas. So let's not talk in idealistic ways about what we should be doing about critical thinking and all of that, because the reality on the ground is very different, certainly as schools are concerned. What are universities concerned? Universities' concerns is to optimize the subsidy income, right, that they get from the department. As a vice chancellor, I can tell you now, the last thing on the minds, when we introduced at the Free State a core curriculum that included critical thinking across disciplines, everybody thought we were crazy, right? Because I really don't believe anybody should graduate with only a degree in engineering. You're uneducated. You know, you might be schooled and trained, but you're uneducated unless you've asked questions in philosophy, unless you've asked questions in sociology, unless you've asked questions about the immune system, which is a big deal, you know, in the pandemic world. But we're not concerned about that. We're concerned about efficiency in a narrow sense and effectiveness in a broader sense. So our educational system from preschool to graduate education. Now, if I listen to the three of my colleagues on this line, they give me hope, but they are individuals in the system that militates against the kind of values like justice and equity that we all would like to
Cobus, you've been, I know you're sitting on a question, bringing on a question. Why don't you ask that, and then Prof Diale, to me, if I might go directly to you for your question, and then to Prof Jansen as well, and then we deal with that. And I do acknowledge that we had a wonderful turnout today, so I'm sure that there are questions simmering in the background as well. So if we might pose all the questions and answer them, such as there's enough time to deal with the questions and guidance from the audience. Over to you, Prof Oosthuizen.
Martin, thank you so much. Colleagues of my esteemed colleagues on the panel, it was an absolute learning experience for me. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for the growth that you've imparted on me today. I appreciate it. I'm a lifelong learner. I absorb. I'm an amateur philosopher. So thank you for helping me in my own journey. Werner, at one point you referred to that not leaning to the one side or the other side too much. And immediately you got me thinking of Aristotle's golden mean, you know, the finding that mean between excess and deficiency. So, you know, and it's that sweet spot. So I'd maybe just like to get your take on your view. If I were like 12 years old and asking you, help me to make that distinction between not leaning too much to the one side or not too little to the other, or too much to the other side of this whole generative AI or AI, etc., etc. Please help me, Van.
Listen, that's a very deep question. I hope I can offer something humbly.
Werner, sorry, we're just going to take all the questions first. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I misunderstood you, Martin.
No
sorry.
problem. Just keep that in your back pocket for a second.
Sorry about
We're going to go over to Prof Tumi. Thanks, Werner.
Thank you. I think my question is, Prof Cobus, you mentioned, it was interesting that you mentioned that people should not necessarily be worried about jobs disappearing, but becoming more competent in terms of the practical wisdom and what they do. And the two things that you spoke about was around, amongst other things, was around transparency and ethics. And my question is, I do agree with you, but how do we begin to engage our current generation of learners in terms of transparency and ethics across the board? Because it is, I believe it is about the daily living value that will be translated into the artificial intelligence space, you know, so, and that we see it lacking on our day-to-day lives. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Prof Jansen, is there a question that you would like to pose to the colleagues?
Yeah, I just want to amplify a point made by Professor Diale, because we tend to get carried away very often, and myself included, with our own hype when it comes to AI and new technologies and so on. But don't ever forget that this affects a relatively small part of the education system. The majority of our children don't have data and devices, and therefore they make decisions that are often very difficult. I wrote an article during COVID based on a smaller research project with a few thousand kids, high school kids, called Data or Bread. It's available freely online, Data or Bread. And that's, you know, and in the light of the budget speech yesterday, just trust me, it doesn't affect those of us on the Zoom call, but it affects a whole lot of people when you have a VAT hike, even if it's as low as 0.5%, at least mathematically, etc. So how do we have this discussion when equity is part of the equation for resolving access and also performance with respect to AI and the like. And this is a deep concern because, as somebody wrote the other day in a Stanford University magazine, AI won't take your job. You won't have a job if you don't know AI, and I believe that is true.
So, Werner, I'm going to ask that you respond, and then obviously there was a question directly to Cobus as well, and then we'll open this to the floor. Also, do have a look if you're able to see at the chat. There might be a question that is directly to you or something that you can answer directly. But to everyone present, we will take some questions, from the floor. So please do unmute yourself, put up your hands, so that we can see those coming. But Werner, it's over to you for now.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Prof Oosthuizen, for the question. I think the thing that I can offer in terms of finding that balance of maybe leaning into your humanity or leaning into developing your AI abilities. I once heard this scary quote that said, "A strength overused is a double weakness." The strength overused is a double weakness. And I think to know your own tendencies and your own strengths, I think is great, and we have to play to them, right? And we have to, if you are more inclined to lean towards the one direction than the other naturally, and that happens to be a strength, go for it. Don't ignore, those natural strengths. However, if we... Yes.
Sorry, I think you've got some mic problems there. Is the sound clear? Prof Diale, is the sound clear on your side when Werner speaks?
No, it sounded annoying.
Noise.
It wasn't. Okay. It's all of us adjusting our set, but I think it might be on your side. So it's coming out quite blurry. Could you fiddle with the jack there?
Okay, let me do that. Is it any better now? Otherwise, someone else can take their question first. Martin, any better?
No, it's not.
Okay, take another question quickly. I'll figure it out.
Thanks, Werner. Prof Cobus, do you want to respond to Werner's question?
Werner, yes, absolutely. I concur, and I think I reflect on a post that's or a comment on a post a little while ago. In this leaning towards the one or the other, where a person by the name of Dr. Saba Kwedwai commented on the post to refer to the cluelessness of the moment we're in, which I just found quite profound. There are so many voices, so many supposed gurus on AI and whatever else. But again, finding yourself, managing the polarities. On the one end, the humanists, and the other end, the technology. And I think it's a day-to-day thing as we also engage with one another, and reflecting on these questions, that we endeavor to find the so-called sweet spot between where do I find myself within those two extremes, so to speak. Well, not extremes, the two poles, that of tech and and retaining humanity on the other end. So, but I concur with you. Thank you. Martin, you'd like me to?
Let's turn it over to the floor. I'm sure there's plenty more to say. There are quite a few open avenues here. I'm mindful that we've got 20 minutes, and we're not going to go over time at all. So if participants from the floor, is there a function? Can they raise their hands? Louise Memaputi, is that possible for them?
Yes, it is.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so if we could see any hands raised, well, I can't see them just yet. Somebody needs to break the ice, as it is with these things. So we need a brave soul to put it out there. Okay, I think in the meantime, Prof Cobus, if you, oh, well, there we go. Tasha van Sale, please go ahead, Tasha.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this wonderful colloquium. I think what I've got more comment maybe, but what I've realized from all of the presentations is that even at our university now, the AI is I wouldn't say the problem, but the challenge. But from all of the presentations, I've heard that no, it's not the only challenge, and that's not the only thing we need to get hold of now and get grips of now. But there are so many other aspects that we actually do forget about. But going back to the ground or doing your groundwork, being in touch with your students, talking to them, and then as we learn our own way in AI, that we can assist the students in that, but that we can slowly, while we're learning, we can probably teach them how to use that as well. And as Prof Diale said, is that there are so many other aspects of a student that we don't know about that's actually a little bit more important than just, you know, tackling the whole challenge of AI and trying to stop students from cheating with AI. So I think it makes me a bit calmer in the fact that I know that I can learn with my students, and we will, you know, we will grow with each other and probably make sure that we are ready for the future. So thank you so much for all of the messages that I've found in your presentations.
Thank you, Tasha. And you've done exactly what we hoped, is that it opens the doors. Can we go straight over to, is it Joshua?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this debate. This is a very hot topic all over the world. People are still struggling to actually find a balance between these AI and especially in education. So the question people used to ask, just as I mentioned by Prof, is that to what extent do I, as a teacher, says that this work is for this student, or actually am I grading the AI? But what we must do as academics going forward is to actually understand our curriculum. In every curriculum, there is what we call must know and good to know. With the must know one, what do we want the student to understand? Can we actually use the AI, force them to understand the must know? And also with the good to know part of the curriculum, will they be able to use AI to develop their ability to think? Because even with the AI, the student still needs to read and also understand what it means when they are using AI. So it's an ongoing debate, and you see, learning, they say, is from cradle to grave. We as teachers must also not be afraid of the future. Like Prof Diale mentioned, we need not to sit in the past. We have to move with Gen Z because they are very fast. They know what they are doing. We also need to move if actually we want to impart knowledge. And even at workplace now, if it is a requirement, why can't we as teachers start thinking along this line so that we can assist our students and also assist ourselves as we go forward in this system? We also remember that when 4 Figure came, it was this type of a debate, but now it has come to stay. So we just need to brace up and see what we can do to improve the use of AI in classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there somebody who, any of our speakers who want to respond directly to that? Is that a nod, Werner?
Can I?
Oh, please, Prof Diale.
Yes, maybe yes, it's a response, but also just adding to what the speaker said. I think in terms of education, what is important, Martin, for me, there are keywords that come up. The first one, which I alluded to somewhere in my talk, about intentionality. The intentionality of what we teach, how we teach, and what we use in our teaching process. But also the second important thing for me is the whole aspect of complementarity, because we need to begin to ask ourselves, instead of asking, which is general white people, what skills will AI replace? We need to actually ask ourselves, how can AI extend human capabilities in this field, or my capabilities? How can it complement or augment what I already know? So we need to shift our thinking towards a transformative way of teaching and learning, and focus on a collaborative nature between the two.
Yes, I think
Martin,
one of those. Yes, please, Cobus, go ahead.
Add to what Prof Diale has also said, and I think, you know, as educators, and I'm very fortunate that we exited Plato's cave a while ago, you know, because of all the voices. But you know, when we created a position of where we are, we had to ask these deep underlying questions, such as what does AI ontologically, or how does AI ontologically change higher education, in our instance, besides the fact how it also how does AI change work, and how does AI change us as humans? And I think, Prof Diale, you referred to that psychological aspect as well. And what changes when we incorporate Gen AI as a tool? How does its use change the purpose of a qualification or higher education? And then, are we clear about the purpose of higher education? Are we clear about the purpose of assessment? And how does the intervention of AI change the purpose of both these? Those are fundamentally very deep questions, and going down that rabbit hole is not in a day's work. It is. So, Prof Diale, what I'm just off the back of what you said is for us to take up the responsibility and get to a very deep understanding of this technology, but how it influences us existentially in our educational life. So thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Prof. I see Andre Rose has been waiting carefully with a sore elbow now. Please go for it, Andre.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very fascinating discussion. I just have a general question, not directed at any specific panelist, but to whoever wants to take it up. But just thoughts around the integration of robotics into humans, and then coupling that with AI, and how it is that, you know, the thoughts around the heterogeneity of it, and harmonizing it, and what their thoughts are about how that might influence and impact our humanity and influence how we look and think about things in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Is there somebody who wants to take that right off the bat? I mean, I'd like to plumb just for my own colleagues at Electrical and Information Engineering, and those working in the biomedical space, working on, say, bionic arms, for instance. So they are wonderful breakthroughs, some of them happening right now and some of them right around the corner, that might be, you know, we evoke these ideas of cyborgs and things like that, but it's helping people live their lives to the fullest extent. Of course, we have these interesting questions around, say, for instance, implants of various sorts. The neurolink is obviously the one that comes up most often, and the ethics around that. But I think at an immediate and near-term level, there are the discussions around, say, for instance, bionics, which is extremely exciting. So that's a lightweight response. If anyone wants to pick that up, please go for it, colleagues. Otherwise, we might have to engage offline on that. And please do contact me, and I can put you in touch with some good folks there. Right, I don't see an immediate nod, so I'm going to go over to John Higgins, please. John, go ahead. Okay, am I still audible? I'm still good? Oh, super. John Higgins, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. What a fascinating set of discussions. And I'd really like to thank all the speakers for their insights and arguments. I just think we've got a bit of a blind spot that I'd like to probe a little bit. We're all educators here, and every day we educate, or we try and educate. We live and breathe education. We see and experience every day the social values and impact of education on students and pupils. We're advocates for ethical education, critical thinking, all the things I think which all the speakers advocated and spoke about. And everybody agreed that some uses of AI can be incorporated into that educational mission. But I want to suggest, well, maybe we all agree on that. But what happens outside our circle of agreement? And I want to suggest that the massive financial investments in AI all around the world and the competition for leading in AI, I don't think they're driven by the kind of biases we have for education and educating citizens. I think they're driven by profit. And a central element in profit making is to lessen the workforce. The workforce is usually one of the most expensive year on elements in any business. And I'm not sure that we've really if we don't really confront the profit motive that is involved in research and investigation and promotion of AI, I'm not sure we're really getting to the question of how will AI have an effect on employment, and how can higher education respond to that? And I say that because, as I've talked about many times before, in the past 30 years, we've all experienced the massive impacts and distortions that neoliberal policy has imposed on higher education through its move away from the value-based skills which we've all endorsed today towards much narrower definitions of education for the world of work. So, what I'm thinking of now is that, we see a living example of advocacy for AI in the billionaire tech bros who are supporting Donald Trump. What they're doing to education and higher education in the USA and, by impact beyond, is far removed from our values as educators. And I think as a part of our discussion of AI, we really have to be alert to the question which has brought us together, questions of employment, questions of citizenship, questions of the value of education, which are far away from the motive forces for the development of AI.
Thank you, John.
That's my suggestion.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to give the speakers, if they have a closing. Oh, we have one more question. Oh goodness, and we've got 5 more minutes. We're never going to have enough time. Well, I'll have to truncate my summation happily. Kakoma Luneta, please.
Yes.
You've got the floor.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Mine is a comment, and probably it hinges on what Prof Higgins has mentioned. We are all aware of how definitely biased AI is. It's predominantly developed by white male, and most of the data is pro-white. Very little data on Black African people. And as a result, will always remain in the periphery, isolated. Most of the information, therefore, is pretty biased. I don't know how much colleagues in higher education, I am one of them, consider the importance of rural context and how we are addressing AI by ensuring that rural communities, rural schools in Limpopo somewhere, in KZN somewhere, are also part of this revolution. I mean, I speak as a Pan-Africanist, and a number of African countries are still grappling with the third industrial revolution, let alone the fourth. Communication is still a problem, and you can't do anything that has to do with communication. It can't work without electricity. Now, my point is, how much of thinking is being considered for communities that are already isolated, that are grappling with the costs of data and so on, as we try to advance its use in the classroom?
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask our speakers, I'm putting them on the spot, to give me a one-sentence, either conclusion or response, and then I'll try to give myself 2 minutes to try and tie a bow around all of this. This is quite a wild field, but then the point of this is to try and bite, or to bite off more than we can chew. So Werner, you're up first. Your one sentence repartee, please.
I'm concerned my sound is still problematic. Martin, is my sound better now?
No, crystal clear.
Okay, great. I thought it was a great discussion. I loved some of the issues raised now. I think it's quite normal, I would imagine, Martin, you would have the knowledge on this, that when there's rapid progress in whatever there may be, that ethical questions, like we've heard this afternoon, arise almost in the wake of that progress. And I think that's fantastic to set right any incorrect or place possibly limitations on progress. And so my encouragement would be that all of us engage in that ethical conversation that may guide the further development, and the students that we work with, they need to be aware of these tensions as well. So let's engage to bring to the fore these ethical matters and the critical thinking, independent thinking. There are avenues to promote that. And I'm super excited to see how we as educators are going to explore doing that in the near future. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
Lots of commas, not even a single full stop. Thank you, Werner. Prof Oosthuizen, your one sentence.
Not my one sentence. I would like to draw on a quote by Bonhoeffer that said, action springs not from thought, but from a readiness for responsibility. And as I've indicated earlier on, will Africa shape AI, or will AI shape Africa? And each one of us, individually and collectively, got a responsibility to address these foundational challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof Diale.
Thank you. I think my one word goes back to what Prof Luneta has just said. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of access, equality, social justice, and just ensuring that whilst we are pushing AI, we are also addressing the real day-to-day realities of the South Africans on the ground.
Thank you, Prof. Prof Jansen.
Yeah, thank you. Look, John Higgins is correct. We're not only up against it when it comes to institutions themselves, educational institutions, but also the bigger world in which we hope as teachers, as professors, that we prepare students to have transformative roles in that bigger world. I'm not so sure about that anymore.
We have to just start. And then we'll revisit it as time,
and if you take our really embarrassing exports right into the White House, Pretoria boy, who recently said that the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. Then you can see what we're up against. So thank you, John, for raising that reminder.
Thank you, Prof. So, colleagues, it is 4 o'clock. I'm not going to spend any time trying to summarize all of this, except to say we started with switchboard operators that had to be quick thinking and able to handle criticism, all the way through to calculators and typewriters. We saw 3 big themes come out. The first was that idea of augmented intelligence or augmented thinking. The second that was echoed across several speakers was the idea of external awareness, whether that's inner clarity and external awareness, or whether that's the ability to make sound and contextually aware relevant decisions, the idea of student-centrist contextual relevance. And then the third is that idea of the challenge around rethinking how AI shows up superficial assessment designs, whether it was always always already superficial, but it is now come out in the wash because of the challenges that AI brings with it. In the chat on the side, we saw lots of questions around AI biases, which of course there are, of the colonial positionality of that, which of course there is, the challenge with NVIDIA chips and how hard they are if you want to train African AI, which of course is true. There were questions around the benefits of, say, large language models, of which it's easy to point out. I mean, just look at the wonderful work that's happening with GraphRag at the moment, and then questions about appropriate use versus over-reliance. Well, we certainly can't close the book on that. We have to end this conversation here. I say thank you to the speakers. I say thank you to the lively engagement. I think we were around about 300 odd people at the peak of this. Thank you for the robust engagement. Let us support each other. Let us read each other's works. Let us not be scared of tools, but let us remember that we have a calling to be the voice of the voiceless. Good luck to everybody, and hope to see you at the next Makgotla or Lekgotla. So back to the controllers from ASSAf. Thank you very much.